Hey guys, earbuds in my laundry bin here. Today I'm going to talk about true and the false self. It's an interesting concept. It's something that I think we're all more or less familiar with to an extent. Maybe not all of us, but it's generally an accepted sentiment or concept. And I want to start with the kind of conventional understanding and maybe just lay down some groundwork of like what that thing is, and then do what I do and kind of riff on that and define it in some other ways, because I really have this idea that it's just another duality essentially, which I think will collapse into itself, and I think that the true self is the false self, and I don't know if there is a false self. I don't know if there's a self, but I mean, we need something to call this, so we could start with self. I don't want to get too metaphysical with it to start out with, but I feel like when I'm talking about things like selves and shit, it's hard not to get into metaphysics. So maybe I'll hopefully save a bit of that till the end. But the false self is essentially the way, the content of our personality as in thoughts, feelings, emotions, you know, whatever the difference in emotions and feelings are, just the content, I call it content of our inner experience, whatever that is. And the false self is essentially the image or the expression or the way that is essentially filtered and represented to its environment, or in practicality or facilitation, perhaps. And the conventional notion... Sorry, I just had dinner, so my throat's a little dinnery, so you might have to bear with me here. I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to deliver you my true self, whatever that is. So, the false self is essentially an impingement upon the true self, and it is a fraction or a fragmentation of that, usually by the means of the necessities and the practicalities of the environment, of the social environment, of the physical environment, of the environment however it shows up. The way the false self shows up depends on the reality of the true self and the legacy of the true self. The true self is what is what essentially is the case. Truth is that which is the case. So the true self has to be what is. The true self is who you are. The true self is that content, is actuality, is what there is. So in this splitting, in this sort of negation of itself for certain means, we lose something. We are limited. It is only a certain filtration. That's what I kind of called it. I like this idea of the false self as a filtration device. And in this, it is done as a means of survival. Yeah, as a means of sort of interacting with the environment with skill, honestly, with skill. But the issue comes with the fact that the way this is facilitated and the realities of how we go from this wholeness. You can think of the true self as the whole self. I kind of like that idea, and I think this idea of wholeness is a very interesting idea, and the issue comes with how this means is facilitated. What I mean by that is, how do we protect ourselves? How do we show up? How do we engage with our environment? And the way we do that through this sort of filtration depends on the legacy of our experience. And the legacy of our experience depends on what we are, depends on how our reality plays out. So what I'm trying to get at here is I want to break this thing down. So what is this thing which is being filtered and has to interact with its reality, you know, we can kind of reduce to a drive theory and have this idea of fundamental needs. And the way these fundamental needs of our most infantile sort of developmental states are met and contained by their environment determines how this wholeness, which is our self, shows up for its environment. And it can do this in a variety of means, and this kind of depends on, first of all, the content of our needs, the content of our biological derivative nature, which is that animating force which is bringing forth what we are, which is bringing forth feeling, which is bringing forth thought, which is bringing forth behavior, if that's what happens. And we have this interesting dynamic of there's what happens, there's our behavior, there's how we show up, and there is the content of our thought, or of our sort of driving energetic factor, right? Of where is behavior coming from? What is giving rise to that? What is that sort of determination? Which is interesting. So we have this sort of duality of the false self, and we strive for authenticity. We like people who are authentic. We like people who are themselves. What does it mean to be yourself? It means to show up for who you really are, and we can feel it when someone is not themselves because they don't have a sort of consistency, perhaps. There isn't this cohesion, there isn't this sense of something which stays the same throughout something which stays the same throughout differing conditions, perhaps. You know, there's not that sort of consistency, I think that's a way we can notice it. And this person is not in touch with what they really are on the inside, and I think this happens because what there is on the inside was frustrated and was challenged existentially throughout the course of their legacy and their experience. So we have this lovely foundation, and we have this problem with the false self because it doesn't okay. It is not the girl who I wanted to texting me, unfortunately. And she's supposed to be out of my life, and I'm not supposed to be thinking about her. So look at that. There's a lovely example. So there's the true self, which is I turn my phone on and I have some sort of cognitive process, as in I have an expectation. It just appears out of the ether of, God, I hope it's that fucking pretty piece of ass. That's a terrible way to put it. God, even that's more of the true self. Oh, excuse me. And then also there is the sort of representation of that in, now I name it. So how much of our content goes unnoticed? How much of these little sort of, even as I'm speaking this, what is determining my expression? And this is why I think the false self is the true self, because what true self? Where? Who? What the fuck are we talking about? Can you touch the true self? Is it necessary to be the true self? How do I collapse all of my experience into my expression? How do I bring you exactly what I am? And is it safe and necessary to do so? The true self is a fucking jackass. The true self is a lot. The true self is not sunshine and roses. I don't know about you, but I have some stinky ass shit which flows through my fucking think tank sometimes, and I don't know about you, but I'm trying to flush. It doesn't smell too good. And how do we know that it doesn't smell too good? Use your fucking nose. That's what it ultimately reduces to. And I think what this truth, this genuineness that we want, is in how the content of the true self is essentially organized. It comes down to organization, and it comes down to this sort of content of reality, which is biologically derivative. If we reduce it all the way down, whatever the fuck that is doing, it becomes very ungraspable very quickly. And I think this is where Winnicott really went with it. He is kind of the pioneer, the psychological pioneer of the true and false self duality. He didn't come up with the idea per se, because we all kind of intuitively just get it. You know, we all talk about, oh, masking, autistic masking, or narcissists and their masks, and, oh, you know, I can't be myself around people, or, fuck, you know, people are so bad, people are terrible, I can't be myself. Society, we live in a society. And that's all valid, and that's all cool, and I'm sorry for my sort of slightly negative hand waving around that. Shoot me. But I think that the way... What was I getting? Now I'm losing my train of thought. Fuck! It comes down to the way the content is organized. It comes down to... And the organization of that content creates its own new false self. It creates its own new image. So as I go to my phone to do that, I notice the reality of myself. As in, I have that thought content, I have that prediction and that assumption, and it has like that aim, that object of my desire, and it is either met or it's not. And when it's not met, okay, there's that, maybe there's a bit of an affect there, there's a bit of a, oh well, shucks. Obviously, reality comes crashing down and destroys my house of cards, which is my sort of egoic delusion of getting my needs met in some way, which probably ultimately wouldn't meet them in the way that I want. This is pathology, as you can see, is I have that assumption, I have that thought of my desire, and I can reality test. What am I doing now? I'm essentially measuring. I'm looking at that content that's there, I'm bringing that into my attention, and I'm basically objecting it. No, I'm subjecting it to the object of my being, I think. And I don't know what the fuck that's all about. I don't know how I'm able to measure that. I don't know how that process is happening. But I think where authenticity comes from and why we value and crave this, and we speak of self-development and integration and individuation and showing up with authenticity, is essentially finding a way to bring the reality of the wholeness of what we are into a sort of synthesis. And this is challenging to do because a lot of the content of our experience, as at least I can see in my experience, and as we just got a lovely example of, and I could probably pull examples out of my ass at every single second, and I would think that ultimately there's no end to this meta-reflective organization, and I think evolution itself, this is what it's doing, it's sort of reinventing itself in randomness, whatever the fuck randomness is, and whatever the fuck survival is, and it's essentially measuring itself for the highest, greatest good, it seems, which is kind of what we determine production and pleasure is, I guess. I don't know. I'm not gonna get too evolutionary reductive because I don't know what the fuck evolution is, to be honest. I don't know if anyone does, but I don't know that I know that anyone does, so agnostically agnostic on that. It's in the synthesis of what we are, and how that shows up for the world. And I don't think there is a true self as much as I don't think there is a false self. I don't think there's a duality here. And I think, but with that, like, that's existentially, that's metaphysically. I think there's just a self. I think being is just itself. And this is you. This is it. This is your experience. This is your self doing its thing. And even your organization and your recognition of yourself is just more of your selfing. It's a kind of stacking on top of itself sort of process, it seems, of building up these sort of Jenga towers of ideology, which then sort of take blocks out of themselves until it collapses, which collapses into a new tower, which forms and collapses into itself as a new tower. You know, we get this lovely process, and we have this sort of, what I call, I think this process of the thing collapsing into itself, I think this is synthesis, and I think we have these different ideas, which are maybe the blocks and how they move and how they relate to themselves, which are, fuck, I'm at work, and there is someone at my work I work with youth. I work at a youth center, God, I've already said too much. And I'm going to be vulnerable here. I work with youth who are maybe a bit socially challenged or have certain needs that they need met, and they're here to gain support. They're here to be with people who can give them a facilitating environment that they didn't really get from their environment for certain reasons, perhaps, which I can only speculate about, and I can kind of hold with abstraction, but epistemically assume based on the environment, blah blah blah, philosophical abstraction and rationalization. But sometimes after a week of one-on-one interaction, I feel a little bit of a sense of, fuck, you're retarded, you're really annoying, and you make me feel challenging feelings, and maybe I hate you a little bit right now. Sorry, but that's the case. And that's challenging because that content is there, and I think with people who are retards, these people, we discriminate against them. We have these sort of social practicalities or these ideas of our socialization, and when people fall outside of those based on their own limitations, based on, you know, their own legacies, all the groundwork I laid out earlier, and when they build their false selves and they express those, they don't fit certain practicalities perhaps, and we label these people as retards. They make us uncomfortable, they make us feel bad. I think they make us feel bad because we had to learn in our own development that that was not okay, that we needed to fit certain standards, and we had to punish ourselves essentially, I think, and I think we were punished by our environment to an extent, and I think to the extent that we receive that punishment within reason, perhaps, or within a certain quantity. This is just a theory. I'm not really sure exactly what the difference is here. But to the extent that we receive that sort of punishment or that impingement or frustration from our environment was the degree to which we could form a fair enough compensational image without having to subtract or what's the word I'm looking for? Bastardize a significant quantity of what it is that we really are, where we could essentially translate or filter enough through the reality of our true self, which is our infantile sort of expression and wah-ness, onto pissed off mom who's like, fuck, isn't it? Shit, you know? And who doesn't want to put up with that, or being in grade 1 and wanting to bite people, having sort of aggression and aggressive impulses, if that's the case. We had to face a little bit of that impingement as our sort of infantile omnipotence and sense of being able to get what we want and just sort of expressing ourselves and having reality magically sort of put a giant boob in our face, which gives us nourishment, or however our facilitating environment, here's some Winnicott, could sort of show up for that. So there's these differences, right? I'm not going to let this example go because this is a sensitive topic and a sensitive sort of sharing I'm offering with you here. And I'm sorry if that hurts you, because it hurts me, it hurts others. When we call each other retards, when we hate each other, we have to hurt each other because we had to be hurt in order to fit our environment, because life is not sunshine and roses and it fucking hurts. And our hurt is a means of showing up for our environment and our survival in certain ways. But we are at the point now where when we exclude certain aspects of our society, of our environment, as in people who maybe couldn't build a certain false self in a way to sort of meet practicalities, such as some of the denizens, not all of them, some of the denizens of the youth center, we can show up for that. And I think as a culture, we're learning and we are moving into more of a sense of, right, there's this relativity to our experience. People are different, and all of my assertions and what I put forth and what makes me angry isn't actually based in a whole lot. And if I'm honest, I'm kind of angry at myself. And these things that I put onto other people, the things that I call people retards for, I kind of feel like a retard sometimes. And if I call you a retard for doing something, if I do that sometimes, then I have to hurt. I get that crap thrown back at me. I don't like that very much. And things seem to kind of come back around onto me in a way that doesn't feel very good. And maybe I can do a little bit better. Maybe I don't need to hurt you. Because when I hurt you, it has a way of hurting me. And when I derive satisfaction from doing that, that satisfaction is built on a sort of faulty foundation, which seems to fall out from under me, and I have to suffer as well. And I think we need to face enough of this suffering for us to come around to caring and actually being able to develop this thing called empathy. So, in this environment, I can have that sort of countertransference where I'm like, especially a week when it's busy. I had this one week where one of my coworkers had to take the week off because the city buses were canceled, the fucking regional transport. So I had a full week of one-on-ones with fucking sparsely identified autistic 15 and 16-year-olds and whatnot, and it becomes a lot after a while of 8 hours, or fuck, 8 hours a lot, but 6 hours or so a day of one-on-one. God, certain things in me get activated and challenged, and I notice it in this sort of content that exists within me. So, if I'm gonna be authentic and I'm gonna be good old me here, what am I gonna do? You're a fucking retard. Shut the fuck up. You know, putting all of my content onto you. You know, you see what I mean? This is the reality of the true self, if that's the case. And this is just one gross example of how it shows up. But with that, there's also everything I just threw at you, all of this consideration, this empathetical sort of measurement, which had to come as naturally as the other aspect of the hatred came. So we have this sort of conflict within us of different selves, different false selves, perhaps, right? Which are sort of images or representations of the true self. The true self is built out of smaller false selves. So we have the whole, which is the thing, which is the self, but what is the self other than its parts? The self is this sort of dialectical smorgasbord of I want this and I want this, and it's the way these two things come together and they meet. So we have the thesis and the antithesis. You're a fucking retard. You're not a fucking retard, and I'm a fucking retard for thinking that you're a fucking retard. Oh, these two both don't work very well. I have to show up for this. What does this mean? The Jenga tower collapses into itself, and what happens is we get behavior. We get what happens. So maybe what happens is I have a little bit less energy, and I can measure my state, and I can build this new false self out of it. I think this is what synthesis is, and yeah, fuck, we come back to Hegel. Hey, Hegel! How you doing? This is an idea of how this thing could work. And I think that we find the true self in finding ways to show up for what we are, and finding environments and spaces in which we can express these different avenues of ourself in a way which is safe and facilitating. And what I'm essentially trying to do with this project here is to create a safe space, a real safe space. And I think a safe space has to include unsafety, because I think safety is unsafety. I don't know, don't get me started on safe spaces. I'm not getting into that now, and I don't have very challenging views on that, but I hope to create an environment here where I can express more of myself in its wholeness, so that I can find that synthetic practicality. And I hope to share that with you, because the sharing is part of the necessity of that. So, find your people, find your environment, and do that so that you can meet the world as it is, so that we can organize ourselves, and so that we can bring what we really are. Because what we really are is what we are. And our false self is only pathological to the extent that it denies what it really is. And what that false self is none other than the appearance of what we truly are. Therefore, it's not separate. This is where I get metaphysical with it, where I collapse the two into themselves, and I say there's only the self, and it's true, and you are your true self. As I sit here and I wave my hands, I'm helplessly myself as I sit around and I fucking, God, I don't know, be frustrated and distracted or whatever the fuck the rest of the problems were. I don't know. I watched porn today when I didn't want to watch porn. And I watched aggressive porn. And I don't know how I feel about aggressive porn because it makes me feel aggressive feelings and I'm not really sure what those mean. And millions and millions of other people, apparently, by the demographics and statistics of the video in question, seem to, well, at least be showing up for the same kind of content. It makes me wonder what might be going through their minds as well. I'm not sure. It's all me. It's all me. So I really wanted to make this video because I think it follows up nicely from where I was at on Wednesday with some of the kind of consideration around how I can try and get ahead of myself. And I think the thinking and the intellectualization is more of the false self doing what it does. We build a false self in intellectualization, but I think that's necessary to the extent that it isn't. And I think that the true self is just doing what it does. It's just playing. This is Winnicott's sort of notion, is that we step into being when we are the true self. And there is a difference. Even though I'm saying there is no difference ultimately, but we still make this distinction of true and false selves. So what do we mean by that? I'm not sure entirely. But there is a way, and there is practical facilitation in our lives. I do believe in evolution. I do believe in betterment and development. And I believe that we can find synthetic means through ourselves, through paying attention and through bringing the content of our experience into wholeness and into relational measurement, perhaps. That was a whole word salad to throw at you because everything is a word salad. I don't know what any of my words refer to. I don't know what it is within me that cares and that wants to do better and that wants to show up with a certain quality, because that's what I think it really comes down to, is quality. And if I'm honest, quality is diversity, as in feeling or the state of reality is whole and a real continual spectrum. And I think we need to show up for all of that so that this can optimize itself and figure out itself naturally. And I believe in the goodness of that because I felt it. Because I felt the difference between where I've been and where I am. And it's net better. And I only know that through my experience and through the reality of what I am and the actual pleasure or organizing sort of facilitation or practicality, blah 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 blah. I'm just so sick of talking. I have none more to say to you. I don't know what the true self is. And in that I know it. Fuck! Paradox! Anyways, this was Kenichiro Soda. I hope you enjoy that. I'm going to put the playlist in the description if you want to add your music to it. I'm going to try and use the playlist in these videos going forth. If that's what happens, that'd be cool. And I hope you have a great night, great morning, a great whatever the fuck. And I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.